The next argument is a bit more complex, and you can see, just kind of looking at the rest of the Prezi, that we've got, you know, what it is, and then problems with the theory, and then reasons for comparative advantage. So it really is much more the bulk of what we look at when we look at international trade. So what comparative advantage is the idea that some countries are probably better at making lots of things than other countries. And again, I think it's safe to say that South Africa could probably make most products better than Lesotho can. South Africa has many more people, much more land. I can't really think of a product that Lesotho could make more of than South Africa can. So in this case, the argument for absolute advantage doesn't really work because you can't show something that Lesotho could make. So what we use comparative advantage for is to argue, yeah, there should still be trade, and here's why. So again, we're going to go look at it numerically first. So I've taken the same two countries, New Zealand and Liechtenstein, and again, in this case, it's probably more accurate to say New Zealand can make everything better than Liechtenstein can. Liechtenstein's a tiny little country. I've been there. Kind of cool to go visit, but it really is quite small. So can't really imagine. I think actually they do have a lot of banking there. But anyway, as far as products go, you know, we need to figure out what exactly they should do. So in this case, New Zealand makes more hats, 2, than Liechtenstein does, and more hay, 4, than Liechtenstein does. Okay? So if we had, for example, New Zealand just focus on hats, and Liechtenstein just focus on hay, yeah, we end up with 1 more hat, 4, than the 3, but we end up with 1 less hay, 6, than the 7. So in that case, it doesn't really make sense. Well, you know, was it worth it to make 1 more hat to lose a bale of hay? And that becomes a bit of a hard choice. So instead, we're going to get to a situation where we can see that we've definitely expanded production. Okay? So looking at the bottom box here, what we need to look for, and just so you can understand the organization, everything in red is just applying to hats, and everything in hay, I'm sorry, everything in white is just applying to the hay. So anyhow, what we need to look for is, okay, well, what's the opportunity cost? I mean, it's economics, so of course we're going to look for cost. So what is the opportunity cost of producing a hat? Well, if you can make 2 hats with half of your resources and 4 hats with all of your resources, well, what it's saying is that every time you choose to make 1 hat, you give up the ability to make 2 hay. Okay? The opposite is also true. So we're going to say every time we make hay, a bale of hay, we give up the opportunity to make half a hat. Or in other words, every time we make 2 bales of hay, we give up the opportunity to make 1 hat. Then if we do the same calculation for Liechtenstein, we can see that, okay, well, for them, their opportunity cost of making a hat is 3 bales of hay. But their opportunity cost of making hay is 1/3 of a hat. So, you know, just like anything else, if I were looking for, you know, a worker to, I don't know, put something in for me or do some work for me, I'm probably going to, ceteris paribus, if quality is the same, I'm probably going to choose the one that is the lowest cost. So in this case, we can see that New Zealand should make hats because they can make hats at the lowest cost. It only costs them 2 bales of hay, but it costs Liechtenstein 3 bales of hay. Likewise, and it's always going to be, one's going to be one and one's going to be the other, unless they're, you know, the same exact ratio, which, you know, is unlikely. So because Liechtenstein only has to give up 1/3 of a hat to make a bale of hay, as opposed to half of a hat, they should focus on making bales of hay. So then this last square over here just kind of demonstrates that by focusing on what they're good at, so New Zealand's going to make 3 hats, which means they have the capacity to make 1 more hat left, and that 1 hat can turn into 2 bales of hay. So we've got 3 and 2. Liechtenstein's not going to make any hats at all because they're not very good at it. Instead, they're going to focus all their resources on making hay, and that's going to double, and it's going to be 6. So now the worldwide production, if our world is only these 2 countries, of hay goes to 8, and hats remains at 3. So instead of 3 and 7, now we have 3 and 8. So again, our argument for comparative advantage, that it's better for everybody, holds true here. Okay, then we can see this on a diagram as well. And in this case, we just make our our production possibilities curves. And the general, or not the rule of thumb, the way it works is this. The country that is smaller, and you can think of smaller as in their amount of resources or their producing capabilities. Anyway, the country that's underneath is always going to focus on the smaller gap. Okay, so Liechtenstein, the smaller gap is hay, that's what they're going to focus on. And New Zealand, they're always going to focus on the bigger gap. All right? Okay, why does a country have comparative advantage? It's just a real quick question to look at. And basically, it's because they've got a lot of one type of resource. So it might be they've got a lot of labor, a lot of land, a lot of capital. You know, countries with lots of land, again, South Africa has got a lot more land than Lesotho does. You know, China's got a lot more land than the United States does. So China's going to have comparative advantage, you know, in things that are very labor intensive. This is not an airtight theory, and it is a theory of comparative advantage. So first of all, you have this assumption that buyers and sellers have perfect knowledge, which is always a bad assumption in economics. Secondly, we typically don't factor in transport costs. It's going to cost money to take your product from one place to the other, and that doesn't ever really get into the argument. The idea, the theory, only ever looks at two countries instead of a bunch. However, they have actually shown that this does work with multiple countries. So that's something that we don't have to worry about too much anymore. It assumes constant returns to scale, and again, certain countries may be producing as much of a certain thing as they already can, as they really can. So to try to get them to produce more is going to really bring costs up. Differences in durable goods. So you may not really, you know, it's easy to compare Liechtenstein hats to New Zealand hats, but what if one of the types of hats really aren't very good hats or stylish hats or whatever? And then finally, there's this problem that completely free trade just simply doesn't exist. There's going to be tariffs. There's going to be, you know, blockages to completely free trade, whether it's, you know, protectionism or whether it's, you know, New Zealand is in a trade agreement with other countries and they're not going to be able to trade as freely with Liechtenstein. But that last one especially is kind of the reason that we really argue for free trade and the expansion of it.